All right, what is going on, fellas? I figured I would make another simple, more me to you, here's some practical advice type video, as I have done for the past 2 days. Today, I wanted to make a video kind of talking to the people who are in the same boat as me. And that is people who have a very hard time eating their way into a caloric surplus on a regular basis. So we have this misalignment of appetite and your metabolism, right? So if left to your own devices, you would always kind of tend towards either maintaining a low body weight or a caloric deficit. At some point in the future, I'll make a similar video for people on the other side of the coin, right? People who their appetite outpaces their metabolism. So if left to their own devices, they tend to overeat, right? And their issue is, I don't have any difficult time putting on weight. In fact, I have such an easy time doing it that I tend to accidentally put myself into large of a caloric surplus and gain fat at too high of a rate. And that's my chronic issue. And I find myself having to cut way too often rather than enjoying this slow, gradual gain in body weight, right? So there's a whole bunch of people who fall somewhere in the middle where their metabolism and their appetite kind of line up roughly okay. And that's the ideal scenario. But for those of you who are like me and really struggle to get down enough food, I've got some tips just from practical experience. I know it sounds kind of funny coming from me now that I'm fat and I'm 260 pounds, but when I was first getting into this, I probably weighed about a buck 45, a buck 50, and it was the biggest, hardest part of lifting for me to get in enough food on a regular basis. And every time I've ever tried to get my body weight up, it has been this constant upward push of eating and force feeding and throwing up meals because I'm pushing down too much food and having to get up and go put that meal back down. I always would throw up on my walk back from my dining hall back to my dorm, and I would just turn right back around and I would have to go eat another meal at the dining hall because I wanted to gain weight. I'll throw up my shake. Just go fire up the blender, make another one. And so it's been a habitual struggle for me. Even now, I weigh about 260 pounds, and I would very much like to get up to about 275. I think that would be more conducive to hitting some of the numbers I'm looking to hit. But all of that being said, I'm very much struggling to do it. But over the years, I found lots of little tips that I think I could pass on to you guys. And it's the same stuff I would tell a younger version of myself. So you're a guy like me, you're a skinny noodle man, and you need to put on some muscle. Or you're not a skinny noodle man, you're a muscle man who still wants to put on more muscle. Here are my tips. So the first thing we're going to look at is consistency. We need a solid amount of consistency in our dietary habits if we ever want to consistently end up in a caloric surplus. If you're this person who has this misalignment of appetite and metabolism and there's too much variability, you're always going to have, maybe you nail it one day, but then the day you slip up, you're always going to fall under and it's going to average out to a net neutral. You're not going to be able to gain weight. So the basis of our weight gain is trying to implement more consistency into our dietary habits. And how do we start doing this? Usually what I tell people to do is building your way into a regimented, strict, and consistent diet is harder for some people than others. So we want to start out with something that's very easily attainable, and that's one meal per day. We're going to eat the same breakfast every day. We're going to make sure it's pretty calorically dense. We get good proteins, fats, carbs, maybe some high calorie density foods in there, and we have a solid breakfast. You're like, okay, well, this looks like the breakfast of a big guy. I'm just going to get in the habit of eating the breakfast of a big guy every single day. And once that's kind of clockwork and it's a habit, it's not something you're having to force yourself to do anymore, then we can start looking into building our way into a big and consistent lunch. And then that kind of brings me to our next point. So we develop this consistent diet, kind of starting early in the day and kind of building outward with these habits. The second thing is going to be you need to bump up how many times a day you eat. Some people skip breakfast, only eat twice a day. If you have a small appetite, that's certainly not going to fly. And if you've been struggling with this, I'm guessing you've already been eating 3 meals a day and you're still not gaining. You're eating as much as you can in those 3 meals. Well, that tells you that 3 meals is not enough. I usually tell people as you get more serious about lifting weights and more serious about these goals of gaining muscle mass, most people are going to have to move to 4 meals a day at some point. 3 meals a day, I think, is perfectly reasonable. 2-3 for a sedentary person or a person who engages in exercise. But someone who engages in difficult, rigorous strength training, most people are not going to be able to put down enough food in 3 meals. That's more for the people people who just engage in exercise, not rigorous training. So we would be looking for maybe 5. I think 5 requires a bit more experience in a regimented diet. You know, you need to be pretty good about eating every couple hours on the hour if you want to get down 5 meals. So that's something you can build into with time if you find it helpful for getting down enough food. But making the switch to 4 full meals per day, maybe 4 and a shake as an intermediate point if you're still struggling to gain weight at 4, is going to be a necessary step, because clearly 3 feeding windows was not enough given how much you can eat in one sitting. And I think that's a change that many people need to make at some point to adequately fuel their recovery. So step 1 is start implementing consistency, starting early in your day, building across the day, and making sure that it's replicatable and you're doing it day after day until it's habit. Step number 2 is probably build in a 4th and maybe a 4th and a half meal with some kind of shake, assuming it digests reasonably well for you. I would say tip number 3 is don't hammer a bunch of just garbage calories if they're going to wreck your digestion. I think that is a unsustainable game to play of, okay, well, I'm just going to have a tub of Ben & Jerry's every night. Well, if that's wrecking your stomach, your sleep quality is going to shit, it's not going to be this net positive that you're hoping it's going to be. So yes, pushing in a little bit of like dirty food can be helpful from a caloric density perspective, but keep your digestion in mind. In a perfect world, I know it's hard for you, it's hard for me to eat enough food to get in a caloric surplus and clean food, but that is the ideal that we strive for. Why? Not because there's anything magical about clean food, but generally foods that are denoted as clean digest a little bit better, which is going to be something that we want to keep an eye on while we're pushing all of these calories. And foods that are generally considered clean or healthy are more dense in the micronutrients that are also going to bolster our performance in the gym. And then the last tip I was going to give you is if you're really struggling and we have our 4 meals and they're somewhat consistent, and you know, we're building from there, we're going to take a look at each meal and find ways that are low difficulty to fit in more calories. So we almost want to take the reverse of the exact same tips people will give for weight loss. One of the first things someone who's trying to cut weight will be told, and it's great advice, is just to cut all liquid calories because they're easy to overconsume. Well, if you're struggling to gain weight, you could almost make a rule of every time I eat a meal, I have something with some liquid calories with it as a way to run up additional calories without as much difficulty. And we find these little windows to sneak in easily accessible calories, right? So including some kind of liquid calorie with each meal is a very simple and effective one. Bringing some kind of intra-workout drink, whether it's just a Gatorade or a Body Armor, or just some kind of fruit juice in a jug to the gym. So rather than just drinking water, you're just using that training window to get in a little bit more calories. I personally will bring Rice Krispie bar with me to the gym while I train, because my training takes a while. That's going to be a big window without intaking calories. I can throw that down halfway through the workout. Doesn't upset my stomach at all. And it's, again, finding replicatable ways to sneak calories into this built routine that we can do consistently because it's not difficult. I think those would be my biggest tips is, right, we need to start with getting our consistency on point, then build into more feeding windows per day. It's just going to be a necessity if you're a guy with a small appetite. I think number 3 was don't force shit calories at the expense of your digestion. You're going to get hungry slower if your digestion is really poor. So you might be able to get more down that meal, but the following meal, your appetite might not return as quickly as had you followed the little bit more difficult approach of getting in more clean calories, and then looking for windows at which we can sneak in very low effort calories on a consistent basis. I think these would be my main tips for someone who's really having a hard time putting on the muscle mass. Thank you guys for watching.